ザ・ワールド。歌教員、いきなり吹っ飛ばされている。バカな歌教員。
Noriaki Kakyoin, a very popular JoJo character, is the only fictional character to have ever made me cry. Yes, you heard me right. The same person who couldn't cry to Akira Toriyama's death, a man who literally built the world of anime, cried to Noriaki Kakyoin, a fictional character. Now you may be asking, Ryan, why is that? Well, it's because I connect to Kakyoin on a deeper level, unlike Akira Toriyama, who I know for making Dragon Ball and causing anime to be what it is today. And I don't really relate to him, other than the fact that he hated socializing. Now, before we begin, I have to give a spoiler warning, as this contains heavy spoilers for Part 3 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get into why Noriaki Kakyoin is the first and only fictional character to have ever made me cry. And I just want to say that while I was writing this essay, I was still crying because Kakyoin's death has to be the saddest death I've ever seen in fiction. In this essay, we'll be going over his story, role, and his origins to figure out why I cried to his death and still am crying. Noriaki Kakyoin is a 17-year-old stand user who plays a prominent role in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Stardust Crusaders, as shown when he defeated Tower of Grey and Death 13, and figured out how Jay, Gil, and Dio Brando's stand work, triggering their defeat. His stand, Hierophant Green, is a long-range base stand being able to expand up to 1,000 meters, or 3,280 feet, which can shoot emeralds via the attack Emerald Splash, and has very long tentacles. Often, during fights against stand users, Kakyoin is heard yelling the name of his attack, Emerald Splash, every time he uses it. Noriaki Kakyoin was born in the year 1971, and when Kakyoin was a young child, he had difficulty making friends due to the fact he thought no one would ever understand him, as no one, at the time, could see his stand, Hierophant Green. Eventually, one of his teachers told his mother that no one didn't like Kakyoin, it was that he was unapproachable and didn't want to make friends. His own mother admitted that not even she knew much about her son, or why he was so withdrawn from others. Kakyoin observed the other children, writing down the names of their friends and why they understood each other. He felt that even his parents had each other, but that they would never relate to him. About in between 2 or 3 months before the beginning of Part 3 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, titled Stardust Crusaders, when Kakyoin was 17 years old, Kakyoin was in Egypt for a family trip, and was approached by Dio, who, if you didn't know, is the biggest antagonist in all of JoJo, as even after his death, his influence still affects the story. Kakyoin was brainwashed by Dio via Dio's flesh buds, which connect to the brain and brainwash you into giving all of your loyalty to Dio. With this, he was given a mission to kill the protagonist of Stardust Crusaders, that being Jotaro Kujo. Kakyoin returned to Japan about the same time Jotaro got out of prison. Kakyoin then attempts to carry out Dio's orders by manipulating the school nurse via his stand, Hierophant Green, and uses her to attack Jotaro. However, Jotaro manages to defeat him and takes him home. At this time, Jotaro discovers the flesh bud and takes it out, thus relieving him from Dio's control. Kakyoin then joined Jotaro, along with Joseph Joestar and Muhammad Abdul, on a journey to defeat Dio. At the start of the trip, on a plane, the group of 4 are attacked by an enemy stand user named Tower of Grey. Tower of Grey proves to be difficult to beat, even for Jotaro's stand, Star Platinum. Kakyoin, taking matters into his own hands, decides to fight the Tower of Grey himself and wins. But the plane crashes and they end up in Hong Kong. Now, later, Kakyoin proves that he's a useful ally, but Joseph's stand, Hermit Purple, tells him that he secretly is spy, eventually finding out that this wasn't the real Kakyoin, and that this was a stand user pretending to be Kakyoin. We then get the iconic and goofy scene of Kakyoin licking a chair. In Calcutta, India, Jean-Pierre Polnareff is attacked by 2 stand users, Whole Horse and J-Gel, in which he is saved by Kakyoin and Avdol, who is later killed. Kakyoin fights J-Gel's stand, Hanged Man, and finds out its ability, tricking the stand into going into a coin and allowing Polnareff to kill J-Gel, thus avenging his sister, who was murdered by him. In the deserts of Arabia, the group is attacked by Arabia Fatz's stand, named the Sun. And when Kakyoin tries to fight the Sun, it overpowers Hierophant Green and makes Kakyoin cancel his attack on the stand. Later, he bursts into laughter after figuring out Arabia Fatz's trick. Later, Kakyoin becomes the first victim of a baby stand user named Manish Boy, in which he is attacked in his dreams by a stand named Death 13. He is the first to realize that the baby is the stand user, and though the group didn't believe him, he manages to defeat Death 13 by bringing Hierophant Green into his dreams. He then teaches the baby a lesson by mixing his poop with food. Later, in the Red Sea, Kakyoin participates in a fight against a stand named High Priestess, and they arrived in Egypt. Soon after the group arrives in Egypt, they are attacked by a blind stand user named Endul. In the fight, Kakyoin's eyes got slashed, making him unable to participate until he fully recovers. Eventually, Kakyoin fully recovers and goes to Cairo, Egypt, where the group is currently at, and finds an injured Iggy. He then regroups with everyone and they reach Dio's mansion. Kakyoin was the first to face Talon's T. Darby in a video game competition in which Kakyoin's soul is on the line. They play a racing game named F Mega that Kakyoin is familiar with, and Kakyoin uses Hierophant Green to complete the complex moves. Sadly, he gets defeated and his soul gets placed inside a doll replica of him, but luckily with Jotaro's help, Talons gets defeated and Kakyoin is back to his original body. Finally, the group faces Dio, and Kakyoin traps Dio inside a field of Hierophant Green's tentacles, which, when touched, causes emeralds to shoot out and hit whatever touches it. This whole field ranges from 20 meters, or 65.6 feet, giving the attack the name of the 20-meter Emerald Splash. However, due to Dio's ability to stop time with his stand, the world, Dio stops time and approaches Kakyoin. He then punches Kakyoin with the world through Kakyoin's abdomen and launched him into a water tower. However, before Kakyoin's death, he figured out how Dio's stand worked, but couldn't say anything to Joseph about it due to dying at a rapid pace. So he shot one final Emerald Splash at the nearby clock tower, and thus, Kakyoin died on January 16th, 1989. Kakyoin has to be the greatest JoJo ally I've ever seen, and also has to have the saddest backstory ever. Imagine that your life, up until you were 17, you had no friends, and when you did gain friends, your life ended 50 days after gaining them. Not to mention, hadn't Kakyoin shot at the clock tower right before his death, Dio might have won, killing Joseph, Jotaro, and even Polnareff. I think the reason why I connect to Kakyoin on a deeper level than any fictional character I've ever seen is because he and I don't socialize a lot. He has 5 best friends, and I'm kind of the same way, seeing as I have 5 best friends too, and 1 friend. Not to mention, he's smart and brave, and I want to be that way. He also expresses a lot of loyalty to his friends, and frankly, so do I. Now, something about me is that I never cry to fiction, but other than Kakyoin's death, there is one fictional case where I did indeed cry. My father was here for this moment, and it was when we were watching Come Play, the movie. And trust me when I say the ending scene where the ghost of the mother playing with her autistic son was not only so heartwarming, but also so heartbreaking, seeing as he'll never see his mother again. Now, at the time, I was trying to make myself immune to crying, because I wanted to be a tough guy. And although I did get my wish, unfortunately I regret that wish now, because now I cannot cry no matter how hard I want to. So, when my father noticed me crying, he asked, "Are you crying?" And in a denial fashion, I said, "No, I'm not crying, you're crying," which is kind of funny to look at. Nowadays, when it comes to sad deaths in fiction, on the outside, I react like, "Oh no," anyway. But on the inside, my reaction is summed up to be the equivalent of Joseph reacting to Caesar's death. I can name you a multitude of sad deaths in fiction that on the outside, I didn't care for, but on the inside, I was bawling my eyes out. These examples are Ai Hoshino's death, Vegeta's final atonement, Godzilla Jr.'s death, Kaori's death in the Akira manga, the deletion of Monica in Doki Doki Literature Club, Caesar Zappelli's death, and Jonathan Joestar's death, and the ending to Amphibia. Those are all the times that I've cried on the inside when it came to fiction. Now, I remember reading that Kakyoin's death was used by Araki to make people hate Dio. And although Dio is my #1 favorite villain of all time, in the end, I still hate how he treated Kakyoin upon arrival. But to be honest, Part 3 Dio will always be small compared to Part 1 Dio, in my opinion. But that's neither here nor there. Kakyoin's death soundtrack, titled Tomohino Message, or A Message to My Friends, has to be the only soundtrack to ever make me cry. There has never been a song that I can remember that has made me cry as hard as Kakyoin's death soundtrack. Every time I hear the start of the violins, I just can't pause it. And when the choir comes, my eyes immediately start tearing up and my mind replays the whole scene of Kakyoin dying. Now, I know some of you are gonna say, "Bro, are you crying over an anime? It's not that deep, bro." Congratulations, I don't care. Mocking someone for crying at a death in an anime is kind of hypocritical, because I can name multiple examples of people crying to a fictional death from a Western film. That being Iron Man's death in Endgame, Spider-Man's death in Infinity War, and Walter White's death in Breaking Bad. Just because it's an anime from Japan doesn't mean you have to treat it like it's trash. I know I may sound immature for ranting about this, but I'm just gonna say it. Those who mock people crying at anime deaths are nothing but a bunch of what's on screen, and if you know what those are, then you know what I'm calling you. Like, look, I get anime is still a new concept to people from the West, as the first anime came out on March 7th, 1959, and didn't reach the West until September 7th, 1963. And even then, it wasn't popularized until Akira came along with its stunning animation of 24 frames per second, in which Akira came to America on December 25th, 1989. So to simplify my message to you people who mock other people for crying at anime deaths, you guys are hypocrites. And that's all I'm gonna say. Go ahead, mock me in the comment section. I'll give you the pin of shame. Anyways, back to what I was saying. Noriaki Kakyoin's death has to be the saddest death I've ever seen in video. And his soundtrack suits it perfectly to the point I can remember the entire scene from start to finish. Now, since I'm feeling nice, I'd like to ask you all to comment on what you thought was the saddest death you experienced when it came to fiction, and why. After all, I shared this whole story with you, so why not? In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And this is SSJ Raikou signing off.
We'll be back someday.